This is Robert Merdlacci, the Mindshare Learning Report, Canada's Learning and Technology e-magazine. And welcome to This Week in Canadian EdTech MindShareTV, essential EdTech tools for back to school sneak peek with our Chief Learning Officer, Tim Gard. Tim, thank you for joining me today.
It's always a pleasure, Robert.
Well, I have to say a little bit about you as a master educator extraordinaire. Spent many years at the TDSB. We first connected when I was doing my master's research on the interactive touchscreen technology. And you were one of the research schools. And wow, that seems like a distant past, but a lot's happened since then in the world of EdTech, hasn't it?
It does seem like a distant past, and you're absolutely right. Well, technology continues to grow in leaps and bounds. Now we're talking about AI, right? So yeah, it's incredible what's happening.
Yeah, and there's some real pivotal points in the EdTech world. We're going way back. I mean, the industrial age, some 200 years ago. I was talking about this with Dr. Fullen on the podcast yesterday. I mean, the industrial model emerged, and then computers came into the education arena, and then the iPad and interactive whiteboards, and there are a few markers, the pivotal moments, and of course we can't ignore the internet, right? That was one of the most significant changes, and then we have AI, and so here we are giving a sneak peek to what's in store for this coming year in terms of key apps for teachers, and dramatically different in just 1 year. I would venture to say.
Absolutely. One of the interesting things is, of course, with the advent of AI, you're finding that a lot of these apps are now trying to incorporate AI into their apps because they see that, hey, listen, we've got to do it or we're going to be left behind. So a lot of the apps that teachers have been using in the past couple of years, they'll notice if they go back into this year to have a look, they're going to see that the AI has been integrated in some way, or at least they're planning to integrate it in some way, and they pretty much have to.
So I'm going to share, this is last year's guide that we put together that gives a sense of what apps we reached out to educators to see what some of the most popular apps were, and feel free to comment as we're scrolling down. From a teacher-student productivity perspective, you utilize these tools.
Yeah, it's really cool, Rob, to see that probably the two main Office suites that are being used, if you like, in education, Office 365 and Google. They continue to incorporate a lot of very useful tools for teachers. I know in Office 365, they've upgraded their teams to include some items and tools for teachers to make it easier for marking, for reviewing student work. Google, the same. It's pretty incredible. Of course, they're both powerhouses when it comes to AI. They've invested a lot of money into it. And you'll see that will be even more incorporated into their Office suites. So that's really kind of cool.
Absolutely. But it's going to be interesting next week when we release the updated version, because we're adding an AI component to this, which, so here we were post-COVID, and, there's much has been said about EdTech and its failings around COVID. But I'll say this again, and I've said it many times, and to the Luddites, if you didn't embrace technology during COVID, there would have been zero teaching for kids. So while it wasn't elegant in a crisis, there was the ability, leveraging some of the tools to sustain. Teachers were learning the tools. It was like building a plane as you fly it, if I can use that analogy. And it was a pivotal time for teachers to embrace tech for the first time in any significant way. But you always remind me, and as does Dr. Fullen, it's about tech-infused pedagogy. Pedagogy is the driver, not the reverse. Thoughts?
Absolutely. All of these tools are great. They're wonderful. They do incredible things. But We have to improve teaching learning by equipping teachers with sound pedagogical, technological knowledge. And if we don't do that, then they're just going to be the tools are going to be dissuading kids from what they should be doing, and teachers as well. They can be a huge time waster. And I think who's implemented technology to some degree can see that. There's a lot of hard work into ensuring that you infuse, the pedagogy and the technological knowledge into using the various tools in an effective way, so that students are engaged, they're learning, there's transformative learning going on, and kids become excited because they are learning, not just because I'm using a new tool. And so that's super, super important. I think a lot of people forget that is, hey, look at my tool, look at what it can do. But what I want to say, okay, but will it have an impact on achievement? And that's what we have to be clear about.
Right. And that's where the AI piece comes into play, that gives the potential for teachers to leverage lesson creation with rubrics, more personalization, and giving them back time. The time is that, like you alluded to, it's such a time waster to create a custom lesson, and you would do that on a regular basis.
And here, Rob, is one of the things that AI can really help streamline all of these processes. For example, we talk about ChatGPT. However, teachers can easily use that to create, learning goals, success criteria, rubrics for a given topic, and that saves you a lot of time. So you can really think about how you're going to implement that particular lesson or project into your classroom, and then, of course, infusing the technology to enhance it that much more.
Well said. And in my estimation, storytelling is the rage. And when I think of some of and you were the chief judge on their Schools of the Future Challenge, and watching some of the videos where teachers gave the students agency, the winning video from Sarnia area, where they recreated the community in Minecraft with a sustainability lens and windmills, solar power, collaborating with the city councilor to address the key challenges in the community. And by the way, they were middle school students.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
incredible stuff. I mean, and students want to, I mean, they're not experts. However, we're training them to think the way experts think. And that takes a long time. It's not going to happen overnight. However, they want to be engaged in their world. They live it, they see it with social media. They're seeing all sorts of things going on around the world, and they want to be engaged in solving problems. And when you give them that latitude and you put together a program that engages them in that way, you see incredible things happen, which we saw through the Mindshare contest. And they're excited about this. They say, look at what I've done. Look at what we can do as a community. And they're very much a part of that. And I think as teachers, we need to make sure that we do that as much as possible.
Right. And it's transformational for the kids. It really opens them up to the possibilities of being engineers engineers or software developers or game designers. I mean, these are careers that didn't exist in the past, right? And much like we're doing now. What I love about the Luddites when they slam EdTech is that they're using tech to tell their story. So,
they're very much so, very much so. Well, that's one of the.
I hope Stephen Hurley's watching this right now. Give a shout out to him.
But that's one of the things, though, right? I mean, sometimes I think there's a fear piece going on there, like they're being a Luddite because they realize that maybe I'm not comfortable learning this technology, and it doesn't happen overnight. It's a lot of hard work. I think we talked about this earlier. You cannot do something that's worthwhile without putting the hard work into it. And that includes learning, some of these programs and learning how to use them properly, because there's different levels to that. You learn how to use it, but how can I use it and incorporate it into my classroom so that we're leveraging, some pedagogical advantage. And so that's important. And, and listen, I get it. I've seen it before where teachers say, I'm not going to do that because they're afraid. I think that speaks to the need for peer support and, ongoing collaboration and training in these contexts where they can say, hey, I can do this.
Well, I recall coming to your class for the first time, and I'm sitting in the back of the room, and you have the students going up and getting the interactive board going. It wasn't you. You were very disarming, and from the get go, it was noticeably different the way you managed your classroom in empowering students to
Well,
leverage the
yeah,
tools.
it was our classroom. We're all
Right.
learning. Even though you're the teacher, or I'm the teacher, I'm still learning just along with them. And I learn a lot of things from students because, of course, they will spend the time looking into the intricacies of the various software programs and what you can do with it. Often they might raise their hand and say, Mr. Gard, there's a faster way of doing that. It's like, okay, well, tell me, how can we do this more quickly, more efficiently? And they'll come up and show you. And it's like, good for you.
and
You're
and and you allow them to help you figure it out, and that's empowering to the students. And so, who inspired you as an educator early in your career to take a different approach from the standard practice where teachers traditionally are very much in control? That it takes, it's a, that growth mindset, nurturing that, mentorship is definitely part of it. And learning, faculties of education, some are doing a great job at pivoting, others not so much.
Well, great question. I think back to when I started teaching in the North York Board of Education, and they were ahead of the time. They had a great group of
Very
people
much so.
working. I mean, Peter Skillen, Flick Douglas, among others. And, these
You
guys
have to
were,
mention Peter Skillen. I love that guy.
but you know what? I mean, listen, he knew his stuff, and it was always pedagogically sound. And so you've got these kinds of examples, and it's, you learn. And then, the old adage that you learn from your mistakes, right? Having that growth mindset and say, hey, listen, I really didn't do a good job with that. What can I learn from what I didn't do well? And I'm having that, sort of reflection piece where you're saying, okay, you know what can I do different? So I kept a lot of notes. One year, if I did something and it didn't work out, I would say, okay, I got to change that. If something did work out, then I would hold on to it and modify it. So lots goes on in that whole piece, right?
Yeah. I'm just noticing up on the screen I'm sharing here, Canva. You know, During COVID, Zoom was the rage. That fell off quite heavily as uh, teachers got back into in class teaching. And Canva, in my estimation, is one of the most powerful applications that has taken education by the storm. First of all, it's free and it's democratizing design thinking and the ability to use a tool that traditionally has been very complex to create images. And now they've got all kinds of templates specific to education. Thoughts?
Yeah, both Canva and Adobe have
Yeah.
jumped onto that, and Canva has just recently announced, I think, that they have built AI tools into their design piece. Again, as I said earlier, all of these software, developers are they're going to have to do that because people will jump ship to go somewhere else. If I can do something easier using AI and save me a whole lot of time and yet still produce something that is really powerful, then I'm going to do that. And so Canva being Canva, they stay close to to what's important, and that's what you need to do as a software company, right?
Yeah, and they've devoted a whole department to the education space. And I first saw Canva at South by Southwest EDU when Guy Kawasaki, former chief evangelist of Apple, who was an ambassador for Canva, this was some 7 years ago, showcased it. And he had just released a new book. I was doing an interview with him on this book, and I came back and said, we're going to try Canva. It's a new tool. It's kind of cool. Seems to really be simple. The KISS principle: keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah, yeah, very much so.
Uh, those apps that enable and empower you to leverage the technology to share your voice, much like StreamYard that we're using, and we haven't included that. I don't know if it'll make it into the top EdTech tools for back to school this year, but it's a competitive space. There's only so much on your radar as a superintendent that you can absorb, and as it was described to me, you have to be relevant in order
Yeah.
to get there and make an impact. And it doesn't
And
happen overnight, does it? I mean,
yeah, no, it
some of
doesn't. And that's a good point, Rob. I think the other thing is that teachers can only use so many tools, right?
okay,
So one of the pieces, I'm writing a blog for this episode, but one of the things I say is, listen, you can't embrace everything. You have to pick and choose those things you think are going to really make a difference in your year. Focus on those, learn them well, and integrate them in a way that, as I said earlier, that's going to be pedagogically sound. And adapting every new tool, you're going to be exhausted. You're going to do things very, very on a low level way. So you got to use those tools that you can actually implement in an effective and engaging way, right? So yeah.
well, amazing. We see some Canadian companies. There's some 500 EdTechs in Canada doing business. North America wide, it's some 4,000. I've heard of some districts with 600 apps licensed. I've heard 200. I mean,
Wow. Yeah,
it's about using the right tool out of
that's
your
right.
toolbox
Yeah.
when you're needing to do a task, not unlike when I'm doing some home repairs. And my honey-do list is very long these days. But it's when you laser focus and you use the right tool to achieve an outcome, the sky's the limit for these kids.
It is. And, when they have teachers who are equipped and trained and understand that pedagogical piece and have the technological knowledge, then it can be a very, very dynamic classroom, and where kids are engaged. And, kids want to learn. When they learn, they're so excited about it. I've seen it in so many different contexts. They want to learn. And so when you provide them with these opportunities, it is so empowering, right?
Absolutely. And it's about getting in, can I use the term the zone? Is it the zone of proximal development? Is that relevant here?
Yeah, I think it is. And that again, that's a skill, right? That's a challenge for teachers to make that happen in their classrooms. And that's where we need to build communities in schools and districts, and really learn from each other, so that teachers can learn off of each other, and apply that knowledge in their classroom, and again gain that effective strategy for teaching kids how to learn. Teaching and developing the higher order thinking and their social emotional skills. This is all important, right? So
Yeah.
yeah,
Let's talk about learning platforms, classroom management. It's a crowded space. I'm
it
just
is.
looking here. We've got Edwin, Edsby, Schoology, D2L, Canvas. Um, they all do different things. Many are similar, but at the end of the day, you need to be organized as an educator out of the gate, and this is why we're providing this, back to school essential ed tech tools to help give perspective and help teachers focus, because it is overwhelming, isn't it?
It is very, and you're right. There's some great tools there. In particular, I'm thinking of, Edsby D2L, which I've used both, and actually have reviewed Edsby several times. Of course, the Ontario government has licensed Brightspace, which is D2L's product, right across Ontario, and so everybody has access to that, and it's a really powerful program.
And Edwin is the oldest, most established publisher, pivoting to being really an ed tech company now, has created their own platform to deliver in a more agile way, and um, their resources and some third party resources as well. As
Yeah,
we move to one computing, now, is that ubiquitous in your estimation? Are we at that point? I know the COVID was a driver for moving to one, then I heard, and you had done some fundraising and purchasing of Chromebooks at your school district school at TDSB, and then they came and borrowed them, and
Mhm.
then so it was 1-to-1, and then when they went back to school, it wasn't. It seemed in some districts.
Well, yeah, every
Is that
district's
optimal? Is 1-to-1 optimal, or can you work around that?
it's only optimal if the teacher is able to, again, going back to what I said earlier, if the teacher is able to use that technology in a way that's pedagogically sound and they have the technological knowledge. And so you're finding a couple things here. Number one is the expense of one-to-one in public school systems. I mean, it's huge. To provide a device for every student, there's going to have to be the money to do that, of course. Number two is, how do you train the teachers to use it effectively? Because it can be a huge distraction, and you can see scores and achievement go down, not go up. And so we really have to, you can't just hand a device or give a device to each student and not provide the training. It has to happen, and it has to happen effectively. So those are the sorts of barriers to it happening. But I think eventually this is just, it's gonna have to be what that device looks like in the future. I don't know, because with the infusion of AI, things may be different, right? So
I'm looking forward to getting those Google Glass like devices that eliminate my computer for me, and I could just walk around with a mouse in my hand. It's,
yeah. Well, I mean,
I
Apple's
think we're not far off.
I don't think
And
so.
I was surprised that Google mothballed that project, because I thought you were on a great path.
Well, and then of course Apple has jumped in with their new device, and to me it's clearly first generation. It's a bit it's like you're walking around with swimming goggles on, and yeah, it's powerful, but I'm not
I
sure how
haven't seen them.
powerful.
Apple has glasses.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, they released it a while ago, and I don't. Yeah, they're expensive, extremely expensive. You won't see
Yeah,
them in any condition.
as most technology is. And then
Yeah,
you've got the Gartner hype cycle, right? Right now we're in a massive hype cycle around AI. Any like sneak peek suggestions around any tools that might be groundbreaking that I know FE or ISTE talked about, Richard Collada, the CEO, talked about creating a walled garden platform for teachers when he was at ISTE. So I'm curious as to what they're launching. But there are some interesting tools that are very specific to education that are
well,
emerging.
you're absolutely right. I think obviously the first one out of the blocks was ChatGPT, and when you're leveraging that along with their add-ins, there's phenomenal ability there. But there are others, of course, and it's just going to evolve. And who comes out ahead, or who the top two or three are going to be, it's anybody's game right now, I think. And there's talk about ChatGPT not being able to sustain what they're doing. They're paying $700,000 a day, I think, for maintaining their servers and
Oh
everything
wow,
else. So
that's
right now, there's talk about, hey, are they able to sustain this? And we don't know.
let's talk about, good point. So let's talk about the notion of free. The notion of free results in a teacher and the student becoming the product, from a data perspective. And
Mhm.
I think a lot of people don't realize that, or that hook that
Yeah.
you are giving up, when you agree to those terms that, do we ever read the fine print that are pages long? Like, to be honest, I don't often read it. And depending on what the tool is, I accept. But with open eyes, that either the data is being tracked, or they're going to be hitting you up for upselling opportunities. So that's something that, we need to be mindful of, and it could be pretty annoying, can it?
Well, it can, and of course, schools and anywhere. They have these, these privacy laws that they have to abide to or abide by. And you can't just simply go and use a tool and not know that the information and that student is being tracked or being gathered. There are very strict privacy rules here in Ontario, and rightly so. I mean, no company should be able to collect any information to identify that student in any way. So I think there's a lot of work to be done on that end for some of these companies. Some of them understand that. I've heard some people say, "Oh, well, the server, if it goes to the United States, then we can't use it." Well, that's not true. I mean, everything goes through the States on some level. You can't. It's about the information that goes, right? So we have to be very, very mindful of that. We have to realize that, hey, if you're developing software for use in a school, you better understand the privacy laws and abide by them, or you're not going to be used. Right.
Well said, Timothy Gard. Well, in the interest of time, and for you to go back to finishing up your blog and this infograph on which tools will make it into this year's edition of the Mindshare Report, Essential EdTech Tools for Back to School. Do register for a report if you want to receive a copy that will be releasing next Wednesday morning. Go to www.mindsharelearning.com and you can register. We've shared the link in this tweet that is live right now. We look forward to continuing our conversation. Timothy Gard, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you, Rob. Always a pleasure. Take care.
That was Timothy Gard, Chief Learning Officer at Mindshare Learning and then Mindshare Learning Report. My name is Robert Merglanchi. Be sure to check out www.mindsharelearning to get your latest issue. And until next time, stay healthy, stay safe, and keep the learning curve steep.